A kingdom built from a single decision. It happened in a moment, so small, it almost went unnoticed. A choice made quietly, without applause, yet powerful enough to redirect the course of an entire nation. Long before the world praised his leadership, long before his name became synonymous with transformation, there was only a crossroads and a young Sheikh standing at its center. To understand why this decision matters today, we must return to a time when his country was still discovering its identity. Wealth was rising, but uncertainty rose with it. The world saw potential, but he saw pressure. The burden of shaping a future fragile enough to fail and bold enough to inspire. Nations at this stage often fracture, choosing comfort over courage. But he understood something deeper. One decision made with clarity could anchor an entire generation. That decision began forming during a visit to a remote region few leaders had seen firsthand. The land was vast, quiet, and overlooked, yet he sensed promise hidden beneath its simplicity. The locals greeted him with hope, not expectation. They spoke of challenges, but more importantly, of possibilities. And as he listened, he realized how disconnected national strategy had become from the people it was meant to serve. The idea struck him gently at first. What if the nation's future wasn't built in the capital's boardrooms, but in these forgotten stretches of land? What if greatness emerged not from grandeur, but from investing in places everyone else had dismissed as insignificant? When he returned to the palace, the vision followed him, persistent, unwavering. He shared his thoughts with advisors, expecting curiosity. Instead, he received caution. The region was too remote, they said, the economy too fragile, the investment too large. They argued that focusing on established areas was safer, more practical, more predictable. But he felt a quiet truth growing inside him. Playing safe might preserve today, but it would never build tomorrow. And so a single question began to echo through him, one that would shape everything that came after. Was he willing to risk criticism now in order to create opportunity later? Resistance grew the moment he pushed the idea forward. Committees produced reports filled with warnings, each one describing obstacles in meticulous detail. Economists questioned the feasibility. Strategists argued the location lacked strategic value. Even members of his inner circle, usually supportive, urged him to redirect his energy toward projects with immediate returns. Their words were polished, respectful, and cautious, but none of them reflected the potential he had witnessed with his own eyes. He studied their objections carefully, not to dismiss them, but to understand the fear beneath them. It wasn't the land they doubted, it was the risk of failure. Leaders before him had chosen predictable paths, ensuring stability but limiting transformation. He realized that the nation had reached a point where caution no longer protected progress. It restrained it, and what he envisioned required breaking free from the comfortable patterns that had shaped decades of policy. As his conviction grew, so did the pressure. Rumors began circulating that he was chasing dreams too large, too ambitious, too disconnected from tradition. Some believed his determination signaled inexperience. Others whispered that he was trying to outshine those who came before him. Yet beneath their doubts, he sensed something else, envy mixed with fear. They recognized the power of a leader willing to forge a new direction, and fear being left behind. He returned to the remote region again, this time unannounced. Without ceremony or cameras, he walked through villages, spoke with families, and studied the land at sunrise and sunset. The more time he spent there, the more he understood its potential. It wasn't the land itself that mattered. It was the people, their resilience, their hunger for opportunity, their belief that someone, someday, would see them not as an afterthought, but as the heart of the country's future. That trip solidified his decision. He began assembling a small team of advisors who shared his willingness to challenge the prevailing mindset. Together, they drafted a plan that was bold, unconventional, and demanding. It called for infrastructure where none existed, education where resources were scarce, innovation in a place untouched by modern development. It was a blueprint for a future no one had dared to imagine. But just as momentum began to build, a sudden challenge emerged. A competing faction proposed redirecting national funds toward a massive urban expansion project. One flashy enough to capture public excitement, and politically safe enough to reassure traditional leaders. If approved, Their plan would absorb the budget meant for his vision, effectively burying it before it could begin. For the first time, he felt his resolve tremble, not because he doubted the dream, but because he saw how easily it could be erased by a single political maneuver. He stood at the edge of losing everything he had fought to articulate, forced to confront a truth that every leader eventually faces. Vision means nothing unless defended at the precise moment it is threatened, and that moment had just arrived. The days that followed unfolded like a storm gathering in slow motion. Meetings filled with polite tension became battlegrounds of ideology. Progress measured through bold expansion versus progress measured through careful repetition. The competing faction argued their plan with confidence, backed by senior figures who preferred certainty over innovation. Their projects sparkled with immediate benefits, predictable outcomes, and the comforting illusion of safety. His dream, by contrast, offered none of those guarantees, only potential shaped by belief. He found himself standing before councils where admiration shifted into skepticism. Leaders who once praised his insight now questioned his priorities. Some accused him, gently but unmistakably, of abandoning tradition. Others insisted he was underestimating the complexity of transforming a region so distant from the nation's economic center. With each conversation, he felt the opposition tightening like a cord pulled slowly around an idea struggling to breathe. Yet amidst the resistance, he noticed something important. The voices defending his vision, no fewer, spoke with depth rather than fear. They saw what he saw, the need for growth to reach beyond predictable borders, the need for opportunity to touch lives not yet included in the nation's rise. Their quiet support became the foundation he leaned on, not because it made the battle easier, but because it reminded him he was not fighting for himself. Still, the challenge intensified. The rival proposal gained momentum quickly, fueled by influential backers and strategic timing. Public excitement grew as the urban expansion plan circulated through social circles and media whispers. It promised spectacle and speed, two things his project could not deliver. And slowly, political pressure began to tilt in its favor. He retreated into reflection, revisiting the region in his mind. The dusty roads, the hopeful faces, the conversations that revealed both hardship and possibility. He remembered a young boy who had asked him whether their village would ever matter to the rest of the country. That question returned now with piercing clarity. If he abandoned the dream, he would be answering that boy with silence. The conflict reached its breaking point when he learned that an emergency vote had been scheduled, one that could approve the rival project overnight. If passed, the budget for his initiative would dissolve before dawn. Time had run out. Logic, notes, and projections were no longer enough. What remained was conviction, the force that carries a leader through moments when the world leans heavily toward the easy path. That night, standing alone in a quiet corridor outside the Grand Council chamber, he understood the truth of his journey. A single decision could shape a kingdom, yes, but only if followed by the courage to defend it against doubt, comfort, and political gravity. The moment he had feared was no longer approaching. It was here, and when the doors opened, he walked inside knowing that everything, his vision, his integrity, the future of a forgotten region, would be decided by the words he chose next. He faced the council with a calm that surprised even those who opposed him. The chamber was filled with anticipation, its atmosphere charged by the urgency of competing visions. The rival faction had already prepared their speeches, confident that momentum was on their side. But when he stepped forward, something shifted, not in the room, but in the resolve he carried. He began not with numbers or projections, but with truth. He spoke of the forgotten region and the people who lived there, of the potential buried beneath land dismissed as irrelevant. He described the conversations he'd had on quiet mornings, the resilience he witnessed, the hope that flickered in the eyes of those who believed their homeland would never be seen by those in power. And slowly, his words reframed the debate, not as a choice between two projects, but as a choice between two futures. Then came the turning point. He revealed the rival proposal's hidden weaknesses, the long-term cost disguised as short-term gains, the environmental impact understated in official documents, the strategic vulnerabilities overlooked for the sake of spectacle. He did not accuse. He clarified. He did not attack. He illuminated. And as the facts settled over the room, the certainty of his opponents began to erode. The The climax arrived when he articulated the heart of his vision. Nations, he said, are not built by investing only in what already shines. They are built by lifting the places that have never been given a chance. True progress is not the ability to replicate the past. It is the courage to expand the map of what is possible. He explained that the remote region could become an engine of innovation, culture, and opportunity if given the resources to rise. Not a symbol of risk, but a beacon of national unity. Silence fell over the council. Not resistance, reflection. The vote that followed was close, far closer than anyone anticipated. But when the final tally was read, a quiet current swept through the chamber. His proposal had passed, by a margin narrow enough to reveal the struggle, yet strong enough to secure the future he had envisioned. In the days that followed, construction teams began their work. Roads appeared where none had existed. Schools opened their doors. Investment flowed into villages once forgotten by history. The region awakened, not because of wealth alone, but because one leader chose to see value where others saw emptiness. He visited the site months later, standing on a ridge overlooking the early foundations of a new beginning. The wind carried the scent of change. The land, once silent, now echoed with the sound of progress. And as he gazed across the horizon, he understood the true weight of that single decision. One quiet moment of clarity that had blossomed into a future generations would inherit. And in that moment, he realized something profound. A kingdom is not built by waiting for the world to approve a dream. It is built when someone dares to act before the world understands it. A dream worth pursuing shapes everything that follows. And now, it was reshaping an entire nation. Subscribe to join the journey.